He's a former Air Force officer turned globetrotting missionary who swapped his pastoral robe for a therapist couch. Dr. Daniel Bush, a pastor, professor, psychotherapist, and author, has heard more confessions than a church at Lent. Armed with a PhD in theology, a couple of graduate degrees in mental health and divinity, and a heart full of grace, he's ready to offer you live direction and counsel on Guided by Grace. Join us now on a journey of spiritual insight and emotional wholeness.
Good morning, Cincinnati. This is Guided by Grace, where the perfect blend of divine wisdom is sprinkled with our unique, spicy mix. And the word on the street, John, is that it's got a cozy touch of cinnamon and the rich, velvety hint of chocolate. I didn't know that, but it sounds intriguing, doesn't it?
Sounds tasty.
I am Dr. Dan, and I am your go-to captain of chit-chat, navigating us through the airwaves on this splendid morning. So grab your favorite cup of warmth and let us set sail on today's adventure, guided, of course, as always, by grace. In the heart of our studio this morning, gracing us with his eminent presence, is my friend, my good friend, the Apostle John. He's got his uncanny knack for camping in any kind of weather that Mother Nature throws at him. He doesn't need to know what the weather is. He doesn't even need to check his weather app. He only needs to know whether the batteries he's got will get him through the game.
Very true.
John just doesn't walk on water. He camps beside it, which makes him the holiest man of the highest order. And then in our venerable Aladdin's cave of gadgets and gizmos sits the man behind the curtain who puts the wizard in Wizard of Oz, the Sultan of Sound, Ryan, also affectionately, very affectionately, Ryan, known as Mr. Elvis. He's the guy pulling the strings and twisting the knobs like a DJ at a royal ball, making sure we all stay on that yellow brick road and that the carpet doesn't hit too much turbulence and that we all get home before the clock strikes midnight. Well,
Well, that's a lot of mixed metaphors and throwing fairy tales in now too, but it's your show. I'll take it.
Okay, don't worry. I have everything in my blender this morning. But as we kick off today's journey on Guided by Grace, I want to extend an invitation right from the get-go. After we hit the halfway mark of today's show, we'll be diving into emails and telephone calls, unraveling questions, tackling struggles, and sharing moments of counsel right here live on air. So if there's something on your mind out there, a puzzle in your heart, or if you're seeking to drop some wisdom on me, or you would like some wisdom from me, don't hesitate to reach out. You can give us a ring here at the studio at 513-579-1160. And who knows, we might just be able to get Mr. Elvis himself to take your call and cue you up to share what you need with us on air. And for those of you who prefer whispers of the web, we've got you covered there too. Just visit guidedbygrace.radio.am and click that big blue button that spells out Email the Show, and your inquiries will come directly to us. It's your chance to get involved without having to step into the spotlight. And there are many who don't want to be in the spotlight, you know. So now as we set sail on this broadcast, I've committed the initial segments of this show each week to, diving deeply into, with our many hearts, into areas that are seldom echoed out loud. I've dubbed this next series of episodes that we're working through Grace in the Shadows. The shadows, John. Frightening. This morning, we're going to illuminate a subject that lies close to the core of countless lives. And it was you. You suggested, hey, I think we need to go here. And I was like, okay, let me work on that. And it's depression. Mm-hmm. It's depression. We don't merely want to skim the surface on this today, but we're going to plunge into the profound interplay between Christianity, depression, and self-forgiveness. How does that sound?
Sounds good. That's good stuff.
That's good stuff, right? So a little bit of teaching as we get going here, and then we'll get some discussion. And then I said, like, after the break, we'll take calls and emails and such like that. But I want you to, for a moment, to picture depression as this invisible backpack, okay? It's just too heavy to set down. And no matter how hard you try, you're overwhelmed by it. You know, I've encountered a lot of folks who silently are dragging around this backpack of gloom. It's as though they're being haunted by this or that specific ghost that just won't let them come and enjoy the party. And some are clinging to dim hope, believing in a brighter day that just seems out of reach. And then there are others whom that idea of hope feels very alien. They don't even have that anymore. They're just like, I don't have any hope. And they don't want to be present. I mean, they literally don't want to be present on this earth. They've been wrestling with despair for so long that everything, all the color, all the zest of life is gone. It's all faded to gray. It's as if the world is turned into an old black and white TV show, and they're tired of watching Leave It to Beaver in black and white. You know, they don't want that anymore. And I'm not talking about the run-of-the-mill rough patch here. I'm not talking about the slump that hits when you get a flat tire, and I got one, you know, back in January. I think I was on the way to church at 4 a.m. It probably wasn't that early, but, you know, I got a flat tire, and that was a bummer outside. You know, everything was frozen on the freeway, and I'm calling friends, like, how do I get this tire off my car?
The worst.
Yeah, and it's not that kind of a slump, and it's not that kind of a slump when you have your sports teams not doing well, and you know, otherwise I'd be depressed for a long time, being a Detroit Lions fan and all of that. But this is something else I'm talking about. I'm talking about clinical depression. It's a whole different ballgame, right? It's way beyond the garden variety blues. And now there's this persistent myth also among Christians at the same time that if you're walking with Christ, then that's supposed to shield you in every way from feeling this way. And after all, your faith is supposed to be your armor, you know. Hey, man, I read Ephesians chapter 6 and all of that. So you've got to be impervious to this darkness of depression. So being anything other than perpetually joyful means maybe you flunked the faith class. That's a lot of F's there, but you got an F, you know, you flunked the class. Yeah. But equating devout faith with immunity from depression is like claiming that true believers never get ill. And we all know we get ill, don't we?
That's a good point. You
know, not long ago in my house, we were having NyQuil. You know, we were passing it around like we were taking communion or something. It was like the thing was, you know, we were ill. Yeah. So to suggest that perpetual cheerfulness is a benchmark of a strong faith, well, I'll tell you straight up, that is from the pit of hell and smells like smoke. And I want to dispel that myth today. Christianity doesn't grant us invincible barriers against life's storms, including clinical depression. Clinical depression doesn't emerge out of the blue. It travels along a variety of paths right to your door, and sometimes it's triggered by traumatic experiences in your life, the lasting wounds of abuse or neglect that you just can't get past, that just keep coming up for you. And other times it's encountered through life's abrupt, harsh turns. And to be honest, sometimes it's hormonal shifts. Now, consider how depression often creeps up on us, especially when emotions are suppressed. Imagine a child attempting to express themselves only to be ignored by those who should be listening, or being told to go away, or not being attended to. Faced with that kind of indifference, the child learns what? They learn to bury their feelings deep inside. And isn't that depressing?
Definitely.
It's another word for pushing down. Think about that. Pressing it down, pushing it down. In a way, depression can stem from the suppression of our emotions, from hiding our true selves to maintain connections with those who should be supporting us in some way. And we're coming up against that barrier and never getting through it. We begin to do what? Push it down, turn away from it. And yet, in suppressing those emotions, we inadvertently create coping mechanisms of one kind or another, and our brain devises shortcut ways to handle the discomfort that we feel. But these strategies can backfire. They turn turn into adversaries against us. And I really do believe, I'm really convinced that the grand design, as I understand it, is for us to grow into individuals who can manage our emotions effectively. And I'm still on that growing path. I'm glad my wife's not here today because she's like, you haven't grown enough. And she'd be right, you know. I say it comically, but, you know, I hope she's at home listening and nodding her head. Yes, amen, brother. Get it straight. We are designed to flourish into self-aware, socially connected individuals under the right circumstances, like a tree. You know, it needs oxygen and soil and rain and sunlight, and then it grows into a mighty oak. And if it doesn't get those things, maybe it dies. Yeah. However, many of us aren't so fortunate enough to find ourselves in that good and nurturing environment. So consequently, depression often finds its way in, and deeper-rooted anger emerges because we've been overlooked or unheard or pushed aside, and frequently, very, very frequently, it turns inward. That anger turns inward against the self, and it sparks an internal conflict that is fueled by frustration over maybe perceived inability to break free, to be acknowledged, a harrowing feeling of being caught in the battle with oneself, resentful over what seems like personal shortcomings. If we turn the pages all the way back to the Freudian area, we find this notion that depression is essentially redirected anger. Anger that is, instead of exploding outward, implodes inward. Picture this. You're seething with anger, but instead of projecting it outward, you become your own target. You're in this relentless loop of self-criticism, dissecting every action until self-loathing takes over. Depression often leads to this various cycles of self-blame and deep-seated self-disgust. And if you're hearing me out there, maybe some of you out there have experienced that. I don't like myself. I don't like my inabilities. And all of that feeds into something else. It's chronic shame. Depression's insidious relative. I mean, it's caught in its grip. You don't just feel sad, you feel utterly worthless, as if every part of you fails and falls short. This isn't merely embarrassment. It's a profound conviction of personal failure. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about shame, when we're talking about depression. I mean, it initiates a destructive cycle of shame and despair, dragging you downward into a spiral. It snaps the joy out of life. It makes everything feel pointless. And societal views on depression, which often imply it's only a matter of willpower, that does what?
Only gets you so far.
Only gets you so far. It gets you all the way to shame. It just makes it worse.
Yeah.
Why can't I get out of this? I must really stink. Magnifies that internal and maybe even external judgment from others. Why can't you snap out of this? What's your problem?
Yeah, definitely.
You know, we were talking earlier this week, Joan, right, about Christian circles who's thought that depression may hint at sin. Not outright wrongdoing, but this misalignment with God's truth. And maybe there's something to that. Maybe there is something. This isn't to stigmatize. I don't want to stigmatize, but to suggest that our spiritual disconnections can manifest truly as emotional turmoil. Think about that for a moment. Does the way I'm looking at something, does it end up doing something with my emotions? And it can be hard to look at it. It can be hard to recognize this, even with the help of another. You know, last week we had a caller talked about, what's the use of counseling if I have Jesus? And it's like, well, maybe I can't see something. So even with the help of another, sometimes it can be hard to look at this. It can lead to, but if I look at it with the help of another, it can lead to constructive self-reflection. And I really do believe that can lead to spiritual growth. If I can look, if I can see. Now, I don't want to be misconstrued as oversimplifying depression at all, but I certainly do want to add a layer to understanding and overcoming it. I want to prepare us for a more in-depth exploration of how facing our imperfections can actually open us up to a path of healing and spiritual depth. Depression can be a call to, and this is really a twist. You and I were talking about this, and my wife and I were watching a TV show yesterday, and it was really cool because it had several significant twists and turns in it, and we went, oh, we were gobsmacked. You see, like, well, I didn't expect that coming, but here's the turn in this. Depression can be a call to a deeper dive of understanding.
How so?
Well, you ask how so. And I wonder if people out there are asking the same question, how so? And I wonder out there if people are going, you know what? All I hear you saying right now, Dr. Dan, is that I'm not a good Christian. If I'm depressed, that I've got something wrong and I'm not a good Christian. I'm feeling guilty for this lowness, and now you're really helping me, and I'm feeling swamped by looking at it, and I don't like you. I'm going to turn off the radio program right now. You're even saying I lack faith. And now I'm feeling guilty. Thank you very much, Dr. Dan. And I totally get where you're coming from, where they're coming from. I feel stuck myself before. So let me toss out a question for consideration. When you're on a hike and you're suddenly step into a hole and you trip, and you end up sprawled out in the mud, do you feel guilty?
No.
You don't? Well, you might feel a bit silly. Yeah?
Probably.
Sure. Maybe embarrassed?
Definitely.
Okay. But guilt doesn't really fit the bill for the moment of stuckness, does it?
No.
No. So we don't plan to step in holes. We don't plan to take a mud bath. It's our action, yes. I'm responsible for it. I stepped there. The hole didn't run over to me. And yet, it's a misplaced step. It's not a move we make with an intent to fall. So I wonder if we can, for a moment, put the whole idea of guilt aside, or maybe at least the guilt of being a good Christian aside for a moment. There is a deeper layer to this whole thing if we're willing to dig a bit deeper, to really zone in on where we're standing, so to speak. The Apostle Paul hits us with something pretty radical in 1 Corinthians chapter 1, verse 26 and following. He talks about how God hasn't necessarily picked the wise and the mighty or those who've got their social game on point. Rather, God's gone and chosen what the world might call nonsense. In other words, he's chosen the nonsense to shame the wise. He considers what the world says is weak. He calls it strong to shame the strong. There's another twist in the movie, right?
Indeed.
So now you've taken a good hard look, all right? You've taken a good hard look at yourself, and maybe you've looked at your life experiences, and maybe you've figured out, hey, you know what? I fit right in with all of the klutzes and the nobodies of the world out there. Why, all of those folks who think they've got it all figured out, they focused on getting it right, getting just right, getting square with God, the right beliefs, the right behaviors, the right worship, the right songs, the right sacrifices. And it turns out all along, they are the ones who've been missing the point. Why? I've really become convicted over these last many years that Christianity isn't a religion, but is the announcement of the end of religion. Christianity has only two comments to make. First off, it says this: none of that stuff that folks might get side-eyed looking over, hoping it somehow will elevate their status in the spiritual race, has ever had the least chance of doing the trick and helping them win the trick, win the race. You know, the blood of bulls and of goats and all of that, it never was able to take away sin. Scripture was very clear about that. And no effort of ours to keep up the law of God can ever succeed. I read somewhere in Holy Scripture that all of our good works are as filthy rags. And I'm like, how is that possible? Think about motive. If I'm doing all these good works to make myself feel better, or so that somebody will go, oh, thank you, and I'll get a little bit of appreciation, then I've got this motive problem all over the place here, right? All my good works are as filthy rags. And then there's a second big point. Everything that religion aimed for and missed by a mile has already been taken care of, wrapped up neat and tidy, like a little Japanese present from the store. I don't know if you've ever been to a Japanese grocery store, but they'll wrap your present 3 times over, and it looks beautiful.
Oh, wow.
But I just wanted to get some milk. But the reality is everything that religion aimed for and missed has been wrapped up neatly and tidy in what Jesus did through his death and resurrection. It's a done deal once and for all. And here you are, my friends out there who maybe depression has touched your doorstep and you're grappling with this main course of inadequacy with a little bit of guilt on the side, and those feelings of not measuring up or something as being off or you're not as successful or whatever it might be. I wonder if you can consider for a moment that those things are actually your ticket out of the entire religious rat race. For you, at last, the entire religion shop will finally be closed, boarded up, and forgotten. Instead of beating up yourself for not being a good Christian because you've got depression in your knapsack or depression's got you in a headlock, what if you shifted that guilt for a moment? Consider this, the real miss was not spotting it sooner. That the whole setup, that trying to earn your way to God's good graces was doomed from the start. The reality is God's love is immense. God's love is unconditional. Remember the scriptures that say, while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. That means he died for the ungodly, for the unsuccessful, for the unclean.
Amen.
Now, did you catch what I just did there, John?
I did.
That was the twist of the movie, right? I didn't brush off your guilt or your feelings of inadequacy or depression. I didn't brush it off and say that's silly or it's unwarranted. No, I pointed out that depression and maybe the guilt that you're wrestling with because of it is actually pointing you right to God's doorstep. Which means he's not distant, he's not disinterested. He's using everything, even your struggles, even your misplaced guilt, to draw you closer to himself. And while the weight of what you're going through is real, and I don't ever want to make light of it, it's also kind of an admission. It's kind of an acknowledgement that you're exactly who Jesus came for. Mm-hmm. He came for the last, he came for the least, he came for the lost, he came for the little, and he came to breathe life back into what is dead. Wow. So acknowledging our inability for self-repair, recognizing our self-refuge, recognizing our futile attempts to self-rescue ourselves. Yes, it challenges our pride. You mean I can't save myself? I can't rescue myself? That's an admission that many don't want to make. It's this admission, however, that I think it's the beginning of true salvation. I think that's also where the difficult inquiry of depression makes. If depression can be personified for a moment, if it comes to you and it asks you a question for a moment. It says, who are you? Who am I? I am the one who is the last and the least and the lost and the little. I'm the one who's ready to be saved, who's ready to have new life breathed back into me, and I can't do it myself. I need the Lord. not my power. We need the one who offers salvation and freedom. So, John, we just got a couple of minutes. I was long in that segment. I think I'm always long. I think I didn't prepare my talks to be about 2 minutes long, and maybe they'll come in at about 10.
You got a lot of good stuff to say.
What's stirring in your heart? And what's stirring in your heart as you were pondering while I bloviated?
Honestly, that was uplifting. In that, I think we hear so often that, our infirmities point us to God, bring us back to Jesus, for healing, to, remove our hurts and our inequities, or set us not along the straight path, but just to heal what's broken. And I think with depression, a lot of times, or at least for me personally, I aspire to be like Paul in that, he suffered so much, was shipwrecked numerous times, was in prison, and I always marveled at how he was able to praise and worship Jesus, in the midst of all these horrible things, and that's what I would aspire to. And I think when you go through certain things, and again, to your point, you're not talking about just run of the mill, but like when you're deeply depressed, I think that kind of, you referenced it as Christian guilt, but it can compound whatever it is that we're going through. So now you're dealing with whatever you're struggling with, whatever the cause of the depression is, and maybe sometimes you don't even know what that is. You just know something's wrong.
Something's wrong, yeah.
And then now you're also fighting this idea of, I've accepted Christ into my life, but I still feel, maybe the same way, or I've gone back to feeling the same way, or whatever it may be. And I don't know, again, I use the word uplifting because it really was. You came to the end of that and you're like, we should glory in that because it points us back to Jesus and brings us in to closer relationship with him. I don't know. It's feel good.
It's a unique twist, though. I finally come to the end of myself in depression.
Yeah.
I can't.
Wow. Yeah.
Now I'm ready. He must.
He must.
He must. Great. I can't.
No.
He must.
Yeah.
Well, we are a bit long in this segment, and I just want to say before we kind of go and hear a word from our sponsors that don't be shy. Give us a call at 513-579-1160 and make your voices heard here in this delightful dance. And if you prefer to type, just guidedbygrace.radio.am. We're all ears. We're all here to help. And I can hear the gears running up and getting ready for us to go and hear a word from our sponsors. And I promise you that we will be back and we won't start the fun without you. One of the sponsors of this show is my own counseling practice, Everglades Psychotherapy Group. The clinicians there draw from backgrounds in Christian spiritual direction and clinical mental health counseling. We guide you towards your true self, honoring your faith and individuality. Our tailored approach combines psychodynamic, cognitive, and emotionally focused therapies enhanced by trauma care and attachment theory, ensuring a journey as unique as you are. At Everglade, you're not just a client, you're a valued person who deserves to be deeply known, explored, discovered, and moved in your soul in a way that cherishes your authentic self and assists in releasing all you were created to be. We serve individuals and couples. For a path to healing and self-discovery that honors your individuality and your faith, contact Everglade. Visit https://everglade.group or call 859-935-0110 today and begin your journey to the new you with the help of the team at Everglade Psychotherapy Group. Another sponsor of the show is Ignite Institute for Early Learning in Burlington, Kentucky, a premier preschool and daycare where children from 12 weeks to 5 years old begin an extraordinary journey of growth, discovery, and joy. It was founded back in 2022 by Brittany Bush to address the need for nurturing, effective, and Christ-centered educational setting. Ignite stands today as a pillar of innovative early learning and spiritual guidance. Ignite, however, is more than just a preschool and a daycare. It's a place where the whole child is nurtured physically, cognitively, emotionally, and spiritually. Their approach at Ignite is not only honoring of Christ, but also creates an environment where the children are encouraged to explore and express themselves in a myriad of ways through words, movement, drawing, painting, playing, and even outdoor exploration and other natural modes of expression. This nurturing atmosphere fosters children's intellectual development, which is so important, wouldn't you agree? And cultivates a passion for discovery. And the critical thinking and problem-solving skills that are developed there are essential for later in life success and a meaningful life. So unlock your child's potential at Ignite Institute for Early Learning today. Visit igniteearly.org or call 859-379-9297 today. Embark on a journey that lights up a meaningful, Christ-centered perspective on the world. Looking for a spiritual home in the northern Cincinnati area? Let me tell you about Madeira Silverwood Presbyterian Church located at 8000 Miami Avenue. They're proud sponsors of Guided by Grace. Madeira Silverwood offers a variety of ministries to help you engage in a transforming relationship with the living Lord Jesus, grow in spiritual maturity through purposeful relationships with others, and serve the world by showing the goodness of the kingdom of Christ. Plus, they're a hub for community activities like Boy Scout Troop 209, Cub Scout Pack 20, Madeira's preschool program, Alcoholics Anonymous, and the Ukrainian National Women's League of America. It's part of their commitment to build community through fellowship and active participation. Learn more at their website, www.madeirachurch.org, or visit them on Facebook. Are you seeking to deepen your faith and find a supportive community? Please visit Madeira Silverwood in person or on Facebook. Their contemporary praise is at 9 a.m., and for traditional worship, they have another service at 11 every Sunday. Madeira Silverwood Presbyterian Church, helping you take your next step of faith. Well, welcome back to Guided by Grace, shining through your speakers like the first hopeful sunbeams after a wild night storm. And oh, what a storm or a strange night we had yesterday. Some of you in the Metro Cincinnati area know that we had an ice machine that broke and it spilled chunks all over the floor yesterday. My deck was covered with hail-sized marbles, and here's hoping that it doesn't graduate to a locust invitation next.
Hail and an eclipse in the same week. We must be in the tri-state.
I don't want to think about anything like that. If you have questions that you'd like to ask, or if you have a struggle you need assistance with, then don't hesitate to call us on the telephone and be on air with us at 513-579-1160. And let's swing over to the phone lines where a caller from beyond the Cincinnati airwaves has turned in and found us online in a podcast. And by the way, you can also don't forget that you can listen to us online. Just go to guidedbygrace.radio.am and click the Listen Online button at the top of the website. And you won't miss a beat no matter where you are. You can be in a rocket ship designed by Elon Musk on the way to the moon, and you will still hear us. Okay, I'm told that Lee from Grand Rapids, Michigan, is with us this morning. Hello there, Lee. You're on the air. Thanks for tuning in. What's stirring in your heart this morning?
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate that. Well, this morning, I heard the first segment of your show earlier. You used an example of maybe someone who grew up and in their circumstances, was not encouraged to share a lot of their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So that really resonated with me.
It did.
Yeah. So seemed like a familiar story.
Can you share a little bit about that, Lee?
Yeah. So I think that was, that pretty well sums up my experience. I grew up in my parents were Christians. We were a Christian family, but I think it was, part of the culture of the time, but also the area where I grew up, and even my parents' histories, their own experiences. There was more of an emphasis on doing the right thing. A little bit of a focus on appearances.
Mm-hmm.
Mattered more over feelings. Particularly, I think, coming from children, it was more important as a child, or at least what I took away was that what you doing the right thing, showing the right attitude, that all was valued a lot more than being in touch with your feelings or even expressing your feelings. It's more important to have the right feelings.
To have the right feelings.
Yeah, there were. It was again, at least what I grew up with. The impression I had was that usually, if someone asked you a question, there was probably a preferred answer to that question.
So you just had to get the question. You just had to get the answer right to figure out what they were asking.
Right. Yeah, and so that usually wasn't a question of what am I feeling. It's more of a question of what's the acceptable thing to say in a given situation.
So do you feel like you were discovered, or you just feel like you learned to give the right answer, to be correct?
Yeah, I think that was. I think for me that was a key part of growing up, was figuring in order to make life work.
Mm-hmm.
You learned what was the expectation in a given situation, and how to provide that, whether it was an answer or a gesture or behavior. That's what, that's the way my mind tended to run.
Mm.
So more along that, instead of what am I feeling, or what am I, how is this situation making me feel? What are my feelings telling me? It was almost like I didn't think my feelings were a very reliable source of input.
Mm-hmm. What did you do with them? What did you do with them?
Well, I think I learned not to pay much attention to them.
You pressed them aside, pushed them aside, pushed them down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Suppressed. Yeah. So
Yeah. We were talking earlier about doing that, pressing them down, suppressing them, depressing them.
Right.
Well, how has that manifested in your life? How have you noticed over the years since childhood that that's been present for you? That depressing of knowing who you are and taking in and on board the information of your emotion. I mean, emotions can change. They can change very quickly, like a windsock tied to a football goalpost. But the reality is, it's where you are at any given moment. So, how did it manifest itself in your life? To not be paying attention to those.
Right. So I think there's, I would say probably two primary ways that I've become aware of. One was, I wasn't in touch with my own feelings. Mm-hmm. So that hindered me because I think at times I was always trying to find what I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And there's a fairly limited range of situations where that's helpful. there's a lot more situations where just kind of knowing who you are, you do need to have access to your feelings.
So would you say you weren't in touch with who you are, that where the correct answer would fail you, that you were still in search of who am I? I'm not sure I know myself.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So and then another way was that if you're not in touch with your own feelings, you're not going to be very aware of other people's feelings. Mm. So I think I was only aware of other people's feelings to the extent that I felt like, are they happy with me?
Am I pleasing them?
Right. Am I pleasing them? Yeah. But other than that, I didn't. There was a whole range of emotions I didn't take any. I just had no awareness of. I was just oblivious.
I mean, it seems like if I'm constantly checking, am I making others happy? Are they okay with me? That sometimes you're successful and your happiness comes out of that, and other times when not, then you're like, I didn't get it right, and so there's a constant self-evaluation.
Right. Yeah.
That sounds exhausting.
Yeah, and I think as I got older and I moved into social situations with friends or whatever, I think I tended to sort of have scripts in my mind, sort of.
Can you say that again? I didn't hear that clearly on air here. Say that once more, please.
It seems like I tended to have a script in my mind of how interaction should go. Mm. So, and if things went in a different way or something, then I was kind of lost. Mm. I wouldn't know, again, because I wasn't used to, picking up on people's feelings or interpreting what was happening in that way. So, a lot of times that would leave me kind of flat-footed in a given situation, where I was just really didn't know what to do or say.
Oh, you're a fish out of water at that point.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And as you got older and you went far away from childhood and came into adulthood, and you kept finding yourself a fish out of water in one circumstance after another in time, maybe not always, but...
Right.
What did you say about yourself? What was your internal dialogue? Can you complete this sentence? I'll give you the first two words for free. No charge. I am what?
Well, I think I would say, I am probably struggling was one thing that came to my mind, and I wasn't exactly sure why. Mm-hmm. I think in a lot of my work life, professional life, I did pretty well. Mm-hmm. But among friends and social settings, I sometimes felt like I'm just not getting it right somehow.
Mm-hmm. I'm not right. I'm struggling. I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
I'm lost here.
Right.
I'm lost. Huh.
Yeah.
You ever think that being lost may be the right place for you? The place you need to be?
That it was the right place?
Yeah.
Well, it seemed like that was where I was.
That's where you were for sure.
Right.
But sometimes the I am lost, that dialogue, I am lost. And I'm flailing around. I'm lost. I'm looking around. I don't have a GPS.
Right. Yeah.
And then
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What emotion comes up, Lee, when you think about I'm lost?
Kind of like a feeling of, bewilderment.
Mm-hmm.
Goes on long enough, maybe despair.
Oh, despair.
Yeah.
Do you like that?
Not usually, no.
No.
No, not a good place to be. No. Particularly as I was always somebody who was worked pretty hard to have the right answers. So.
Yeah, to be thrown in that place of despair.
Yeah.
Depressing.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's a part of your life where you don't want to visit that place. You don't want to be in that place.
Right.
It's a lostness. It's a mess within your soul.
Mm-hmm.
What's alive for you underneath that mess? I know there's a yearning to be free of that.
Right. Yeah. There's.
But is that a yearning to get the right answer?
No, I think there's something more than that. I think there's a feeling that there's a better way to live.
Mm-hmm. You ever thought about? It's just coming to me right now as I'm thinking about this. I'm feeling my way towards it right now. I'm lost, and I want a guide. I want to be plucked from this. I want to be found. Is that too much of a reach?
No.
No. I want to be found.
No, because usually, when you're lost, either, I guess, your deepest desire is get out of being lost, whether that's me finding something or someone finding me.
The story
the emphasis is on resolution.
Yeah, the story of the gospel is that we need to be lost if we're to be found.
Yes, it is.
He comes to us to find us, and we can't see our need unless, in the case that we're talking about today, unless we're lost. Maybe unless we're desperately lost.
Yeah.
What's it like for you to hear me turn it that way and to say, for you, maybe being lost was part of your salvation? Part of maybe the necessary first step to open you up to becoming aware of that deepest desire within to be found, to be seen, to be discovered?
Yeah.
What's it like to hear that?
Well, I think it rings true. I think back to my younger self, I was probably going to exhaust every other possibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have been trained very well to get the right answer, right?
Right.
Yes.
So I was going to keep working at that until I ran out of options.
Mm. You had to deplete that.
Right. Yeah.
So eventually the valley of despair, the shadows. I know John and I were talking about what should these episodes be called, and maybe it would Grace in the Shadows came to us, and maybe there's grace in your shadow. I needed this journey. Maybe not everyone needs your journey. Maybe they need their journey, but whatever it is, that there's grace in the shadow, that he's present with you. His presence is with you and finds you in that place of being lost.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit earlier, we were talking, you began to be aware of a despair. And what are you aware of right now as we kind of get towards the end of our discussion right now?
I think there's more hope than despair.
Mm-hmm. This is your story, and this is what he used to bring you to himself.
And there's been the beginnings of change, so that's been encouraging. I guess it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it feels like it's going slowly, but it's going.
Slowly becoming aware of your emotions and the emotions of others, and attending to that aspect of who you are.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. And you're also saying there's hope. There's hope.
Right.
I'm not left in this despair. I'm not lost in it. I'm found.
Right.
It was the mechanism. Depression and even the suppression of these emotions was his way with me. His calling card.
Right, yeah.
I can't help but think, I'm a Star Wars fan, so I can't help but think of tractor beams being pulled into the Death Star, but this was the tractor beam that pulled me in. Well, Lee, it's been a pleasure to talk with you today.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Did you get what you needed today?
I think so.
Wonderful.
It was a good talk.
Thanks for calling into the show. May grace follow you like a determined grandmother with a coat in winter.
Okay.
Oh, well, hope to talk to you again sometime. Please call again.
Okay.
Need personalized grace-filled guidance? Call live at 513-579-1160 with your stories and questions. Guided by Grace with Dr. Daniel Bush.
Well, this is a time for us to look at some emails that have come in. John, you say you got one here that we should talk about. Let's hear it.
I do, and it does kind of touch on what we've been talking about this morning. This is from our neighbor Jimmy in Deer Park, Cincinnati.
Hey, Jimmy.
He states in his email, I grew up in a big lower-class family in which there has always been drama, fights, gossip, etc. I made a vow to myself that when I had my own family, I would raise them better. I keep myself and my children distanced from all of that. Am I wrong for keeping them away from my family? I don't like the drama or the problems, but sometimes I miss my family. After a while, however, I get overwhelmed. That's where he leaves us off.
I mean, drama can definitely be overwhelming, right?
Indeed.
I mean, when we talk about drama, sometimes I'm thinking about the drama triangle. The first thing that comes to my mind, where three roles. There's the I'm a victim role. There's that person over there is the persecutor, and then I need to pull a third person in to be my rescuer. And all of a sudden, we go from one-to-one communication to now we've got a three-ring circus going on here, and we just build triangles upon triangles, and it's all drama all the way down. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy, you said the emailer's name was?
Correct.
Yeah, Jimmy. I don't know if you're listening today, but if you are, should I keep my family away? Well, the first thing that comes to my heart as I think about it is no, but you talk about getting overwhelmed, and maybe there's a time to keep something brief, and when drama comes, you kind of excuse yourself, and you refuse to be roped in either as thinking of yourself as a victim or becoming the persecutor of another, or, coming in along the side as someone's rescuer. You just see the drama being set up, and you, in your own mind, in your own heart, you make a decision. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to add to the triangle here. This is a good time for me to bow out, or to go for a walk, or to come again another day. And, families are messy. You look at me like, yeah, duh. You know that? Messy?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Talking about mud.
Mud, yeah, it's falling in the mud. So what do you think, John? What comes to you if I say, you know what, don't push your family, don't cut them off completely, but watch for the drama.
Yep.
Make a commitment to yourself not to engage in it. And when you get overwhelmed, take your break.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right. And I think, too, if you don't have the tools to deal with difficult personalities, I think that's the time you seek out some help to get those tools to understand how you can prevent yourself from getting overwhelmed. Because I think we all struggle in some fashion with difficult personalities in our family. And I mean, it's a hard question. Do I cut them off completely, or how do I deal with this? And I want to protect my kids. I absolutely understand that.
You bring up a good point about getting some tools. And maybe one of the tools is if you've got some type of trauma, okay? And a trauma doesn't take a whole lot. You don't have to be missing an arm to call it trauma. It's just an event, okay, that has meaning, that occurs when there's distress or stress in your life, so your brain is already ready to be traumatized, and boom, you can't escape it. Yeah. So an event with meaning that you can't escape, that's trauma. And maybe you experienced trauma in your family. There's some things to process through so that your reservoir is not already filled when you go into that environment, that you have some capacity. I'm looking at the time right now, and I'm noticing that we're coming up short here on the hour, and we usually at the end of our time do a little bit of recapping. We don't have much recap time to do here. A couple of sentences, maybe. What do you think of the show, John? What's been stirring in you as you've been listening and tracking along here?
I think the through line today has been when you find yourself lost, to whom do we turn?
To whom do we turn?
And I think we'll always find Jesus waiting.
Oh, that's brilliant. Well said. Well said. You've heard it here on Guided by Grace. Jesus is waiting for us, and he's always right there. I hear the music being queued up and coming up, and that means Mr. Elvis is inching to the front of his line with his iconic thank you very much. And just like that, our time flits away faster than a squirrel in a nut shop. Remember, amid the whirl and twirl of your week, Grace is your silent guide, like a friend who texts, "I'm here." Jesus is waiting when you need it most. Until we meet again, keep grace as your compass and your heart wide open. I'm Dr. Dan, and this has been Guided by Grace. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for joining Guided by Grace with Dr. Daniel Bush. Explore more at guidedbygrace.radio.am. Need personalized grace-filled guidance? Contact Dr. Bush with your stories and questions at support@guidedbygrace.info or call live at 513-579-1160, Saturdays 9 to 10 a.m. Plus, write for Dr. Bush's Wisdom Token, a keepsake to inspire your journey. Join us next Saturday for more healing paths, always guided by grace.